Tokyo is getting harder and harder to develop in. There is a lack of people allowing for their properties to be redeveloped, so you have scarcity. But when it happens, the prices just skyrocket. The price of properties to buy is going up, but the rent isn't. They can't just say, okay, next month is $3,000 a month. They can't do that. It's not a demand. Both parties have to agree to it. Yeah, so if anybody watching at home decides I have to leave or pay this much, you don't actually have to leave or pay that much.
Hey there, and thank you for tuning in. We're excited to bring you another great conversation today. If you like the show and want to support us, please hit the subscribe button so we can keep bringing you great content week after week. And if you're feeling extra generous, give this video a like and share your thoughts and comments down below. Thank you so much. And now, let's get into it. Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today we welcome Alex from Tokyo Portfolio back on the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Last time we met was about a year and a half ago. I think your episode got a lot of interest from people interested in buying property in Japan and living here and looking at the Japanese real estate market. So we have a lot of follow-up questions to this. But one thing we talked about back then was that you were in the process of setting up your own kind of physical agency space that was just about to be ready. How did that go? How did the opening and the launch?
Yeah, well, thanks so much again for having me on the show. And I can't believe that it has been that long. We ended up opening in, I want to say, April of 2024. So right now it's, June, I think. So yeah, it's been just over a year. In fact, we had our 1-year anniversary party about last month. And it went swimmingly, honestly. The opening, of course, there were some things that we had to polish in the beginning, but it looks great. A lot of people walk by it every day. We are right on the corner of probably the most foreigner heavily traveled areas in Tokyo. That is, I should say, expat heavy, right? Because if we're talking about tourists, then we're talking maybe Shibuya or Shinjuku. But for people who actually live in Tokyo that are not Japanese, this is probably where most of them will be coming through at some points in their year, right? But yeah, it's going great. Thanks for asking.
A lot of people nowadays, I imagine, browse properties through online platforms like Sumo or At Homes. And you also have a very visible YouTube channel, Tokyo Portfolio, where you showcase properties around Tokyo and beyond. Why is it so important still to have like a physical space where people walk by and kind of come in?
So here's the thing is that people go online and look at property websites when they specifically either want to do so, right? Want to find a property, I should say, or they are just bored, right? But not many people think, okay, how should I say this? It's kind of the difference between Amazon and Rakuten, right? So both of these places are places where you go to buy things, right? However, if you go to Rakuten.com, not the English version, but the Japanese version, you'll see it's just a sea of stuff, right? And you'll be browsing around there, not particularly looking for anything in particular, but it might just pop up right in front of you. Oh, I want that leaf-shaped silver ring, right? Whatever, right? But if you're on Amazon, you go on because you want that indoor plant. I don't know if they sell indoor plants on Amazon, but you want that indoor plant. Okay, great. You want that indoor plant and you can buy it if you type in, I want a Monstera, right? So basically what we used to be, which was fully online, right, is more like the Amazon way of doing things where you only really go there when you want something in particular, or if you're just like bored and you want to browse around a bit. But having that space for ourselves, like a physical space, allows people to kind of walk by on the way to their errands because there's a huge grocery store right down the street from us, an international grocery store. So they walk by us and they think, oh, you know what? I'll see what's going on in the Tokyo market today, right? The Tokyo property market, They didn't necessarily think of buying anything or renting anything before, but because they saw us, they're like, meh, we'll go check it out.
Do you feel that now having the space for a little over a year has kind of also changed the kind of customers you're interacting with or the way you interact with customers?
Absolutely. So we, especially for purchases, we mainly focus on people who are abroad, who are buying over here, either for a vacation home or because they may want to move here in the future or something like that. And there was always a market for people living in Japan, just like yourself or like me, who wanted to buy something for them to live in, like as their own home, right? But it seems like there's a lot more people who, as I was saying, when they walk by it and they see it, right? If they happen to live in Tokyo, then it'll be a lot easier for them to just go that path, right? So we get more people now who are living in Tokyo who want to buy in Tokyo because of that storefront.
You mentioned people buying from overseas, and I think this was also one of the recurring questions that we got after our last interview. People interested in Japanese real estate from an investment perspective. Generally speaking, all the conversations I've had with people, the topic always comes up. Japanese real estate, it's not really the investment. The value doesn't hold up the way it does in the United States or in Europe. The only thing that kind of keeps the value is the land, but houses are built to be destroyed and rebuilt. Has this changed a little bit, or is it still kind of the same approach?
Yeah, I would say it definitely has changed, especially if we're talking about the major cities: Tokyo, Osaka, Fukuoka, even Sapporo, even parts like Hiroshima. The parts of the country that people don't think of as coming up that much are actually going up in value a lot. In fact, the total price of real estate in Japan has gone up about 2% year on year from the last time that they measured it. So this year or last year, I forget which one it was. But in fact, I think it was 4 years in a row that it had been going up, right? And this is not something that people think of, right? Because the traditional way of thinking is, all right, first off, the value of the building goes down over time, right? And that still is the case in most cases, unless it's like a special property. And then also the value of the lands will go down if we're talking about, especially the more rural areas where you're seeing population decline, right? Or in parts that are maybe a bit more, I don't know, let's call it natural disaster prone or something like that, right? In those kind of areas, you would have property values go down. But I mean, recently that trend has kind of flipped a little bit, right? Because of a few reasons, in my mind at least. Just bear with me. First off, you have, of course, the increase in international purchasing, right? It's not to the extent that you see in other countries, say like the US or Canada, right, where they have a lot of problems over there, or even Australia. But you do see a lot of international investment over here and more of it, right? And then also the other reason is because of COVID. I don't know if I mentioned this in the last interview, actually, but basically what happened during COVID was a lot of Japanese people who would go out a lot, right, during the week, stopped doing so. So they were able to save up. And also, when you have like a couple, maybe no kids even, a dink as they call it, dual income, no kids kind of couple, they can save up enough money to pay for a down payment, right? And once you get the down payment, then you can pay for the loan just like you would if it was rent, right? But getting that down payment has always kind of been a problem.
It's a bit tricky, yeah.
Right. But I mean, if you can save, I don't know, 5-10 million yen or something like that, that's a decent enough down payment to be able to buy something, right? So because of that, especially in the bigger cities, you're seeing more and more people able to buy properties where they wouldn't have been able to before. And then also there's the problem of just the price increases in construction, right? And yeah, just any kind of renovations or anything in general. Yeah.
I saw recently this 3D mapping of Japan, and they were highlighting where prices of property increased and decreased. And you can see that for the countryside, it kind of still is decreasing. But for cities like Osaka and especially Tokyo, it was just like going up and up and up. And the property prices were like extremely high. The average salaries in Japan haven't changed too much since last time we talked. But you mentioned maybe a dual income, no kids kind of a couple is now able to save up enough. Is it enough, or does it really depend on the property, or in the case of Tokyo, on the area where you're in?
Oh, Tokyo. Yeah, when we're talking about Tokyo, the area makes a massive difference, right? So where my office is, it's in a place called Azabu, so Minami Azabu, close to a station called Hiro, right? That's one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Tokyo, period, to live in. And it's always been expensive, and it hadn't really gone down that much during, let's say, the Lehman kind of whole thing. And
the 2008.
Yeah, the 08, crisis and all that. But it's constantly going up. It's just the area that everybody wants to live in, right? But recently, we've been seeing that there's other parts of Tokyo that hadn't traditionally been the most popular or the most expensive going up like crazy. So like a good example of this would be Nakano, right? So Nakano Broadway,
Yeah.
you've been to Nakano, right?
I haven't been there, but I know it's famous for like this secondhand watch shop street.
Yes. And also Nakano is kind of like the original anime town, right?
Oh.
So everybody thinks it's always Akihabara. Akihabara was originally where people went for electronics, right? But
Yeah.
Nakano is where you would go for the anime stuff. That's where they had Mandarake, I believe, is the one over there. So inside Nakano Broadway, they have this huge, store. Mandarake has like these huge stores in there and all that. But it's always kind of been this salaryman's paradise kind of thing, right? So the north side of the station, I'm not going to say Shimbashi. It's kind of different than Shimbashi. It's a bit grittier, to be honest. But it has recently seen a lot of new developments on, I want to say, the south side of the station, right? So for instance, there's a brand new building over there. It's a big rental only, like apartment building, right? Owned by Sumitomo, one of the bigger developers over here. And it's the only like luxury apartment block over there, right?
In that area for now.
Yeah, for now, exactly. And they're in the middle of redoing that kind of station area. And because of that, I mean, we've seen pricing go up like 15, 20% year on year.
It feels like it's a first time in a long time that people may buy property in Japan and it might accrue in value over time and they can actually resell it if this is something they're interested in.
That's always kind of been the case if you buy in the right area. But for instance, in Nakano, it hadn't really been going up that much. Other parts of Tokyo that hadn't been going up a lot compared to the areas would be like Takanawa, if you know where that is, near Shinagawa Station.
Okay, yeah.
That's technically part of Minato, right?
Is this where they're building now this huge, like 3 giant building, new complex, what's it called?
Takanawa Gateway, that's what I was going to bring up. So a good rule of thumb, if you wanted to buy in Tokyo, and like I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't say it's definitely going to go up, but probably will go up, is to buy something in an area that you're seeing a lot of redevelopments going on, right? So what they do with these redevelopments is they buy all of these parcels of land, right? And they're pretty small. I mean, I'm not going to say it's the size of this table, but the smaller ones could be definitely the size of this corner of the room. And it takes them years, sometimes decades to do this. And once they do that, they kind of make it into one big thing and they build all their buildings on it, right? So it's not something that happens all the time. In fact, it rarely happens. But when it happens, and like right before it happens, if you buy, I mean, the prices just skyrocket over there.
So who's buying those properties?
That's a good question. So when we're talking about Takanawa Gateway, it's actually mostly commercial spaces. So the majority of those are going to be held by the company that did the development, and they'll just rent it out. But when we're talking about other places in Tokyo that have seen redevelopments, like for instance, Azabudai, if you know Azabudai Hills.
It was, is this where the new Kabukicho Tower is? No, that's a different area.
No, that's Shinjuku. So that's over in Kabukicho. But
this is how you see how often I go to Tokyo.
I can tell. You're a resident expert over here.
I'm trying to just map Tokyo in my head right now. But
by the way, you know Tokyo better than I know Osaka. I'll just put that. Yeah, I'll put that out right now. But so Azabudai Hills, right, is the new big development that they put out. And in fact, at the time of its completion, Azabudai Hills, the JP Mori Tower, which is the biggest one, was, I'm not sure if it still is, but it was the tallest building in Japan.
Oh, is this where they put the new Aman residence?
Yes.
Okay, I see the building.
Exactly. So did we talk about that last time?
No,
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Right. But yeah, putting that aside, we can talk about that later. But it used to be the tallest building in Japan was Abe no Harukasu, which is the one in Osaka.
And they
so
took it from us.
That from you. Yeah. You know, I don't have any Tokyo pride or anything necessarily, but it's not Osaka anymore. Sorry, dude.
Yeah.
You know, but I think that the next tallest building after Azabudai Hills will be also in Tokyo. I think it's close to Tokyo Station. I think it's not Torch Tower or something like that.
It probably will remain that way because I don't see any large development plans here in Osaka, at least not like in going up. We've got a lot of buildings going up, but not that high.
No, not that high. I mean, you have a lot of big apartment buildings and condos.
They built quite a few with the expo that is now happening. A lot of fancy hotels opened up in some of these buildings, so it's always the same, right? Commercial at the bottom, and then you've got some office spaces in the middle and the hotel at the top. Four Seasons, Waldorf Astoria, both opened here.
That's true. You have the W that opened a couple of years ago.
W also. Yep. But W, I think it's a whole building at the hotel. I may be
Oh,
mistaken.
you're right. You're right. I believe it might be.
Uh,
Yeah. So I see what you're talking about. You're
Yeah.
talking about the multi-use
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah, that's kind of what's happening in Tokyo too. Just because they can't put aside all the real estate to
Yeah.
have the hotel, you know. And one of the first hotels to do that was the Park Hyatt, actually. So the Park Hyatt has office floors, and then it also has like the top floors are all the Park Hyatts itself. But yeah, putting that aside, Osaka is interesting. You know, I'm still trying to get my head around the real estate market over here.
It is interesting. I don't think I can answer any of the questions you may have about the market here, but maybe we can dive into that in a little bit.
Yeah,
You were
sure.
talking about Azabudai Hills
Oh, yes.
not being the biggest buildings and about who's buying those properties.
Yes. So who's buying in Azabudai Hills? So Azabudai Hills has 3 main towers. There's also a tiny little thing too for residences. But the tallest one is the JP Mori Tower. JP standing for Japan Post, because that's where their headquarters is now.
Oh.
Yeah, and it used to be the headquarters of Japan Post is what they tore down, right?
Okay.
If you look way back when, you can find the pictures of it. It was a cool building. But JP Mori Tower, right next to that, you have Residence A and Residence B. Inside Residence A is, you mentioned the Aman. So the Aman residences are in the JP Mori Tower. In Residence A, you have the Janu, which is like the sister
Sub-brand of Aman. Yes.
Exactly. I call it like light Aman, because Aman tends to be pretty dark in their interiors.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, they tend to use kind of, at least in Tokyo, they use kind of darker wood tones and all that. But Janu is very light and bright, you know. Nice hotel, right? But you have the Residence A tower and the Residence B tower. And the interesting thing with this is I mentioned before how they have to do these big land grabs to make these things happen. It took them, I think they started in the 1980s to buy these properties up, right? Just for that.
A long process.
Oh yeah, it was a very long process, and it took them like 30 or 40 years to get everything ready just to like build it all. And what they do with these properties is sometimes they will buy them outright, but they'll usually just give them an option between, okay, we'll buy it outright, or we'll pay you a reduced amount, but we will give you a unit in whatever new condo is being built on your land.
For free?
Yeah, it depends on the contract, but yeah, usually for free or for like a very reduced price.
So that would have been one of my questions, because if these large development companies acquire all these properties downtown, are the local residents being kind of kicked out, moved out, forced out, or are they getting kind of, let's call it fair deals for?
I would say, yeah, Japanese law makes it pretty fair for them. It's very hard to just like force somebody out of their land, you know, if they own the land at least. And so, yeah, generally speaking, they are given, or at least they have the choice to buy into one of the condos on that new building that gets built there. But there are sometimes some outliers who, like the stragglers, who decide, you know, I am not selling.
And they resist. And then you see this one tiny property surrounded by giant buildings.
That is exactly what happens. And that is the biggest dilemma to developers out there. They hate the stragglers, you know, but they have the power to do so, right? But in the case of the Azabudai Hills complex, that's one of the reasons that it took them so long to just start the building, right?
So the development companies are Japanese, so they rebuy the land and they build the property. Who's buying the units inside? Is it mostly foreign investors? Is it local residents?
So the developer on this one is called Mori Building. They're one of the bigger ones within Tokyo. They focus mostly on luxury properties, and they have their own network of people who they approach. They're long-term Mori, clients, customers, whatever you want to call them, tenants in some cases, who Mori sees as a safe investment, right? And somebody who they don't have to worry, you know, oh, they're going to flip it right away, or oh, they're going to trash the place or leave a bad name on Mori. You know, it's a family-owned company, so it is. Yeah, it's a family-owned company, completely private, right? They're not listed on any stock exchanges, and yet they own billions of dollars of real estate, right? So they have the final say as to who buys, at least directly from them, right? Okay. So that's why they reach out to their own people, who tend to be Japanese for the most part, right? They do have some foreign clients whom they will reach out to. But again, it's less of, hey, I want to buy your property, more than it is, hey, do you want my property? It's kind of like how Hermes or any of these like really high-end, brands work, in that you go in, you can't just walk in and buy a Kelly.
No.
You got to go in and you got to build your rapport with the sales associate or whatever, and then you can at some point be offered something. It might not be exactly what you want, but once you buy that, then you can buy the one that you actually want. It's the same thing with Mori, right? So the thing is, though, to answer your question, they originally will sell to whoever it is that they want to sell to, but they don't necessarily have control as to who that person sells it to, right? And what we've seen in Azabudai Hills, especially with the Amman residences, which are the most expensive condos in Japan, period, by the way.
What kind of price range are we talking about?
Ooh, on the cheap end for resale, we have to talk about resale because the original pricing is just... I'll give you an example. There's a corner that you can see Tokyo Tower on, right? And when we see Tokyo Tower, we're talking looking down at it because I don't know if it's actually taller, but it feels like you're looking down at it, right? And it's over 300 square meters or like 3,500 square feet, give or take, right? And that unit, 3-bedroom, 3-bath, I believe it was, originally was being sold by Mori for, I believe, 3 billion yen.
So, 3億.
30 oku.
10億.
Yeah, so 3 billion yen, right? So in US, that'd be, at the time, it was like 20 mil, right? So let's call it, 18 million euro or something like that, right? Now, I know the guy who bought that unit secondhand, right? And he paid, it was never lived in or anything. It was, but they call it secondhand. He paid, instead of 3 billion yen, he paid 4.5 billion yen.
So that increased pretty quickly.
Yeah, and this is within 1 year. I mean, it hadn't even been 1 year. And then he's a Japanese guy, by the way, right? He got a cold offer from a Chinese buyer. So like it wasn't on the market or anything. He just literally, the guy sent him in an offer. Somehow he got his contact for 8 billion, which he then decided, okay, I am not going to take, right? Because he was thinking, if I take this, I am literally never going to be able to buy in this building again. And I like the unit because he thinks, and he's probably right to think so, that it's going to continue going up in value.
And also the relation maybe with the Mori family, if you flip things, kind of like with watches, right? If you just buy the watch and flip it, then you can't buy again from that.
You're absolutely right. However, in this case, he didn't buy it directly from Mori, if you remember. He bought it from the guy who bought it from Mori. So that guy is completely, he's trash now, to Mori at least, right? But the guy who bought it from that guy, it's fine. He didn't do anything wrong. And then he, got that offer for 8 billion yen. And he decided, I'm not going to take it, again, because he wouldn't be able to buy in there. And he told that to the guy. And then the guy came back and said, what about 10 billion? So 100 oku. In other words, about maybe right now, almost 80 million US for a 300 plus square meter condo. It's pretty crazy,
That's
so,
a lot.
but that kind of answers the question as to who buys, what kind of people are buying this. And it's mostly Chinese, to be honest. They're the ones who want to get into it. Chinese buyers have a very different way of buying than, say, Western buyers or Japanese buyers, in that they prefer, overall, this is a generalization, of course, but overall I've seen they prefer taller buildings, brand new buildings, and buildings that are in kind of like a easy to understand area for them, right? So easy to understand meaning popular or just like close to things that they would want to be near. So in the case of Chinese people, in that class at least, Ginza.
We're talking about ultra luxury properties
Yes.
there, and I'm curious, what do these buyers, especially the foreign buyers, then do with those properties? Because I don't imagine they will live there. They may come in for business, but even then they may stay at a luxury hotel, I can imagine, because they can get the service and they don't need to prepare anything themselves. So what is happening with all those properties purchased by foreign wealthy buyers?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the ultra luxury part of it, because when we're talking about, say, the Amman residences, they are, again, the most expensive condos in Japan. And they also have a lot of kind of services and amenities that other buildings wouldn't have. So for instance, you do have the pool and the spa, just like you would in a hotel. You have Amman trained personnel that are working downstairs as your concierge. And then also you have a cleaner service that will come in when you're not there, just to, spruce things up before you come in. So I think they also do, room service as well. So from Janu, I believe. have to double check on that. I'm pretty sure about that one though. But basically, that is almost like a hotel in that regard. But in most other buildings, you're absolutely right. They don't have those kind of things. So a lot of the times, they just kind of let it sit, and I don't like that, right? I'm a proponent of, if you buy it, you should probably use it, right? I don't like people buying a condo just to like rent it out right away. That's not really my thing.
That brings up like a couple of questions, but that will bring the discussion to different direction. But
Sure.
I'm curious because one of the big discussion points here is like, okay, the possibility for foreign buyers that are not living in Japan to buy property and own land here without having a residence permit, a visa, or anything like that. Has the increase of foreign buyers that leave property sitting empty kind of brought up this discussion, also possibly legally speaking, to kind of restrict or control or kind of put some regulations? Okay, you want to buy property in Japan, you need to live here, or you need to spend at least half of the year in your property, otherwise you can't buy.
So first off, let's just talk about point by point there. The half the year thing, that's impossible to do unless you, like more than half a year, it's impossible to do unless you have a working visa or a student visa or something that allows you to stay in Japan, not as a tourist, but as a longer term kind of person, right? So that's one thing. And there hasn't been any discussion in that regard necessarily, but there has been discussion of like outright not even allowing for foreigners to buy in Japan. And that has not been by the ruling party over here, which is the
LDP.
the LDP, thank you, but one of their adversaries, right? So as to whether or not that would actually be pushed through at all, it remains to be seen. But yeah, that is something that, if it were to happen, it would happen probably within a few years because Japan laws take a little while to process through, right? But yeah, so far there hasn't been any concrete movement to make it more difficult or impossible for foreigners to buy, right? So for all intents and purposes, a non-resident foreign individual, right? So in other words, a non-Japanese person who also lives abroad, has all the same rights when it comes to buying a property in Japan as a Japanese person living in Japan. That's it. There is one little caveat there in that I'm not sure if it's just for Chinese people or for all foreigners, but recently they have instituted a rule saying that you can't, as a foreigner, buy a property that is close to a sensitive area. So like, let's say, like a military base or something like that, right? That is the only exception to that rule.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that actually leads me to my second question. If it's so easy or legally there are no restrictions for foreign buyers to buy property, and in the case of these luxury apartments, for example, you have a certain number of foreign buyers that buy them, leave them empty, and are able to make phone calls and just double the price by billions and billions of yen, isn't that then completely pricing out Japanese people or most Japanese people from certain areas, from certain buildings, and creating kind of like empty areas? Not empty, that's a big word, but a problem of like, okay, this building is there, all the units have been sold, but half of them are not used.
Funny you bring that one up. So that specifically reminds me of this big project that they have in Tokyo. It was the former Olympic Village. It's called Harumi Flag. I don't know if you heard about this huge project it's a place called Harumi, which is just off the coast of Ginza and all that, but it's not particularly close to any station. So they built it for the Olympics, and then they sold it off really, really like heavily discounted, right? We're talking like, probably 20% less than what the surrounding areas would go for. And it was like Chinese people were going crazy for it, right? Because to them, they don't care about the access to the train stations. They don't care about, anything else. Just, it's kind of in Tokyo. It is technically in Tokyo. I can get my car over there really easily. And then I don't care, because at the end of the day, it's going to be a difference of 2 to 3 minutes versus if I lived a bit closer, and it's cheap, right? Like all these things kind of came together. And however, at the end of the day, are they actually using it? Not so much. It's mostly being either just, rented out, right? And actually there has been a couple of incidents lately where they've been doing, how do you call it? It's like not Airbnb, but they have a law over here called Minpaku. Yeah. Not quite. It's short-term rentals, right? So not month by month or week by week, but like literally night by night kind of thing, using it like an Airbnb, just not on Airbnb without a license. So they've been caught doing that. It's made the news within the last couple of weeks. Have been cracking down on it specifically for that building.
Interesting.
So that's kind of the outlier, but that you will see a lot of windows whose lights never go on. I'll put it to you that way, right?
You mentioned the area where you have your office as being one of the most expensive residential areas in Tokyo, and that as a counterexample you gave Nakano, which now has its first luxury residential area, and the price is starting to creep up little by little. If we think about the American real estate market, we constantly hear headlines. Let's take New York as an example of landlords just increasing rents and pricing out the renters and kicking them out easily and so on and so forth. What about Tokyo or Japan, generally speaking? Is this a possibility, having a luxury residential area where people start paying more and are willing to pay more? Can landlords just then adjust the prices of all the surrounding rental areas because it's getting popular, or are they more or less protected and can stay in their neighborhood?
They're very, very much protected in Japan. So they don't have rent control like they do in the US. I'm not sure how it is in Germany, but I'm sure they have something close to that. But how it works over here is that you can't just raise the rent as the landlord in most cases, right? So I don't want to be too technical, but there's two different kinds of rental contracts in Japan. You have the normal rental, which is what 80 or 90% of the rentals will be, and then you have something called a fixed term rental. And that fixed term rental, both of them, the normal rental and the fixed term rental will be somewhere around 2 years. Sometimes you see 3 years, or maybe 1 year or 4 years for the fixed term rentals. But the difference is exactly as the name states. With a fixed term rental, you can only stay there technically for the duration of that lease, right? So if it's a 2-year contract, it ends after 2 years. However, they have sometimes a provision in the contract that says that if both parties agree, you can recontract it. You can't renew the contract, you recontract it. And then you can have it for another 2 years or 1 year, or however long the landlord says that the tenant can stay in there. So that's what a fixed term contract is, versus the normal contract, which has been the norm for decades now, which is it's usually 2 years, right? But at the end of the 2 years, it's automatically renewing, right?
Yeah,
so
I think that's what I had before.
Yeah, I'm sure you had that before. That's like the norm across the board, right? And fixed term contracts are kind of a new thing in Japan. Although in the US, for instance, that's kind of the norm. Probably in Europe, that's more or less the norm as well. But yeah, so getting back to the normal contracts, though, you can extend it for basically as long as you'd like as a tenant. And the thing is that a lot of people don't realize is that with a fixed term rental, at the end of the 2 years, if the landlord says you can stay another 2 years, they can set exactly how much that rent is going to be, and you can't do anything about that, right? You can agree to continue it, or you can ask them, you can try to negotiate with them maybe, or you can just pull out, right? So that's your 2 options with that, 2 or 3 options. With a normal lease, though, they can't just say, okay, your rent is $1,500 a month now. Okay, from next month it's $3,000 a month. They can't do that, right?
Oh, interesting.
They can try to do that. They will say to you, hey, like they'll send you a letter in the mail saying, hey, from next month or next year or whenever the end of the contract is, we're going to be upping it to X amount. Please sign here, right? And it's not a demand. Both parties have to agree to it, right? So it basically they can't do anything about it if the tenant knows that they have the upper hand there, right? In a lot of cases, they don't realize that, right? Because people aren't taught that in school, right? So they say, oh, I have to pay this much now. Oh, I have to either figure out my finances or get out of here, right? But yeah, so if anybody watching at home decides, okay, I have to leave because my landlord is telling me that I have to leave or pay this much, you don't actually have to leave or pay that much. Just keep on paying the same amount.
That's good to know.
Yeah, although they can take you to court if it is like, okay, you're paying, let's jump back to yen, 80,000 yen a month, while the going rate in your neighborhood for the same kind of property would be 150,000 yen a month. But they'd have to take you to court. They'd have to literally sue you to do this whole thing. And most landlords don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, so they'll just keep it there until you decide to actually move out and then increase it for the next 10.
Exactly. So that's the only way that properties rents go up over time in general is once people move out. Now, what that also means is that, we were talking about how the price of properties to buy is going up like pretty significantly in certain areas, but the rent isn't, right? So how it works in property investment is people want to have as much of a return in their monthly rental income as possible as a ratio to how much you paid for it, right? So the annual income that you get from your property divided by how much you paid for the property is what they call a yield, right? In Japan, they think of things in gross yield, or how much it actually brought in, versus in the US, they think of things in cap rate, which is what was the profit on how much you brought in, right? So it's a different number. But in central Tokyo, the gross, remember, so the entire amount of rental income over 1 year that a property would bring in compared to how much somebody bought for it. If it's in a place like Hiro, like where, Minami Azabu, that kind of area that my office is in, it's going to be somewhere around maybe 2 to 3% gross, right? So after expenses, it could be much, much less than that, maybe half of that. While in places like LA, that could be somewhere around, 3-4% net. So in other words, pure profit, right? So
quite a difference.
It's a huge difference, right? And that's just because of how the laws work over here versus in other countries, because you can't raise the rent, right? But this is another reason that the majority of people buying as an investment in Tokyo that are not Japanese will actually be from China or the surrounding countries, not companies. They'll be from China or the surrounding countries because their annual rental income yield is actually lower in a lot of cases than Tokyo.
Oh, so Westerners are used to higher yields, so they don't see it as valuable compared to interest.
Exactly. So that's why, I've been in this business for over 6 years now, right? And I can count on one hand how many clients I've, had who have actually bought a property for investment over here. Because it doesn't generate that much in monthly rental income. If people are looking at it in the long term for what's called capital gains, where, I bought this property for, 100 million yen, let's say, but in 5 years, it'll be worth 300 million yen or something like that. They may buy over here. But if they're actually just looking to generate income every month, they'll think, you know what, I can put my money into the S&P.
And it's going to generate better. Right?
Way better. Yeah, more than 3% a year. And remember, that's not net, that's gross. So yeah.
I want to go back to the discussion on the two contracts you were explaining. And I want to have another situation and see if you can answer my question. What if you live in a unit and you have a normal contract, but your landlord or the owner of the building decides to sell the entire building to another company? As you mentioned, these larger corporations are trying to build a plan, and maybe a small building that you're living into is being sold to a larger corporation. What happens to your contract then and to your rights to stay in that building?
So if there are a few different ways that they can evict you, but it's very strict. The laws on that are very strict.
One of them happened to me a while back.
Yes, and that's literally what I was going to explain. I think I know the one you're talking about, in that they are tearing down the building. Is that
correct?
The correct one? Yeah. Okay. That's the biggest one that people kind of fall into. Is it's an older building, and somebody bought it and they're tearing it down to make a new building, or to do a land grab like we were talking about before, right? But in that case, how long did they give you? 6 months?
Maybe even a little bit more. And
Right.
basically, they were paying compensation for moving out. And the faster I moved out, the more compensation I would get.
Yes. So here's the thing is, you could have fought that, by the way.
Oh, well, this is what I was thinking. But then also I don't want to get lawyered up.
No, you don't want to get into a legal battle.
I was just like, okay, I'll take as much as I can and get out of there. And it was time.
So there's entire companies that are hired just to evict people in the same way that you were evicted, right? And where it's not the property management company or the landlord themselves who will contact you. I'm not sure if it was in your case, but a lot of the times it'll be like a company that they subcontract to, right? It kind of reminds me, have you heard about this? I'm sorry to get off a little bit, but they have a service over here that started coming up in the last maybe year or so, where you can call in. You're an employee at a company. You want to quit. You call this company and they quit on your behalf.
I heard about that.
I'm like, what? But it's kind of something similar to that, right? Where they will, the eviction company, tachinuki, that's what they call it, right? The eviction company will go in and they can't like roughhouse you anymore.
Tachinuki, like get up and leave kind of?
Tachinuki, yeah, basically. Yeah. It's the word for eviction in Japanese. But it used to be that you could be a bit more heavy-handed. Like there was a lot of, the Yakuza involved in some cases. But nowadays, that's not the thing. But yes, they encourage you, quote unquote, to leave your place. In a lot of cases, you will be paid a bonus, as you were saying, especially if you don't fight it. But yeah, I mean, some people will stay in their contract. Stay in their apartment until the end of the contract and just be a total menace to the developers. A really famous example of this would be in Roppongi. There's a building, it's spelled ROI, it's pronounced wa.
Which means king in French.
Exactly, yeah. So in Japanese, doabiru, literally that's how they say it. Yeah, and that building had a tenant in it who would not leave, period. And they were planning on tearing that all down to make room for the new addition to Roppongi Hills.
Okay.
And they couldn't do anything about it. So but that's a pretty common thing. But yeah, so if somebody sells a building that has contracts in it, right? Rental contracts in it. Those contracts just get basically transferred to the new owner. So the same thing with all security deposit and all that. That all becomes responsibility of the new owner, and the new owner has to take those contracts with the same terms.
Okay.
Right? Unless they explicitly renegotiate with the tenant. Doesn't really happen too often now.
Something that's making the news quite a bit also with these big property development projects is how they are also taking on public land, parks. I think Meiji Koen, with the trees being chopped down, is one of the largest discussion points. We had Rochelle on the podcast a while back, who's also trying to push back against this. Are there laws protecting these public lands, these public spaces, or is the power where the money is?
It's if the city decides, hey, you guys can use it, that's pretty much it. I mean, if there's public backlash like there is with the Meiji Park whole debacle, I mean, I really hate the fact that they have to tear down all those trees. I don't think they do. And in fact, what happened was they had a huge protest with really like prominent people in Japanese culture, right, going after this, like different singers, like really famous singers and artists and all that going after it. And plus all of the activists as well helping out with that. They backed down, right? They said they're not going to do as big of a project, in terms of cutting down the trees as they were originally discussing. They'll only take down the trees that need it. If that means, I'm guessing it's the ones that are directly in the way, but they're saying some of them are, unhealthy or something like that, right?
That is an easy excuse, I guess.
Yeah. But look, I am definitely a proponent of keeping greenery in Tokyo because, to be honest, it needs more of it. You really just have Yoyogi Park and then little tiny parks every once in a while.
I think I read the other day that Tokyo has 3.5%-ish of green space.
That sounds about right.
Osaka has less.
That also sounds about right.
It's pretty sad for these big cities, especially when we see in the West all these efforts for more sustainable urban environments, walkable areas and green areas, also helping to reduce temperatures, cooling down the streets. Do you see any of that happening in Tokyo in the property market, or is it really just like build taller, bigger buildings?
You're talking about in like re-greenification? Yeah, it's a pretty bad outlook, to be honest, for most of Tokyo, right? So this is a reason why most of our clients tend to like the western side of Tokyo more than the eastern side of Tokyo, because on the eastern side of Tokyo, with some exceptions, there's not many rules about greenification. Right. So, and you can see it when you're just walking around, say, Asakusa, where there's like almost no greenery. It's just like building. And the same thing with like around Ueno, for instance. But just like on a like on a ward or city, whatever you want to call it, basis, some of them will have greenification laws. Right. So, for instance, in Setagaya, in a lot of Setagaya, in the more residential areas, so Setagaya is on the west side, by the way. They have rules saying that you have to have 50% coverage of the frontage of your house. So in other words, you have a road right here, and your plot is on that road. So the part of the plot that faces the road, you need to have at least 50% of it covered by greenery in some shape or another, right? And then they'll have like rules saying, okay, you have to have this much behind the house and all that kind of stuff too.
This is on a ward per ward basis.
It's on a completely per ward basis. It's not a Tokyo-wide thing. And then also within each ward, there may be certain areas that have even more strict laws. Like there's an area called Daenshofu. Daenshofu is kind of the OG Tokyo rich person's suburb, right? It's
old money and
very old money. They built it. They started developing out there about 100 years ago. They modeled it after English towns with their spider web kind of shape, you know?
Okay, yeah,
They kind of
I see
radiate
it.
out, you know what I'm talking about. And if you go around there, you'll see that it's very green. You have trees all over the place, right? It's not like a forest or anything, but it could be in America, or it could be in Europe or something like that, at least in the UK maybe. And yeah, those kind of places will have their own greenification laws, but in total, yeah, I think Tokyo, at least on the east side especially, it has a lot. It has a long way to go.
Laws in Japan take time to come into effect.
Mm.
You mentioned some contracts laws, some greenification laws, regulations for some foreign buyers to not buy in certain areas. Since we last talked, has there been any significant new law coming into play for renters or buyers, like something that has kind of changed in the market, or has it more or less been the same?
Not much has changed, to be honest. I mean, it has only been a year. The biggest thing I can think of is now if you are a foreign buyer, not a foreign person living in Japan necessarily, but somebody living outside of Japan, buying in Japan, you need to register an emergency contact in Japan on the deed itself. So, for instance, we put our company as the emergency contact, so it'll actually show on the deed emergency contact, Black Ship Realty, that kind of thing. That's the biggest difference. But yeah, otherwise, actually, here's a new law. So I think this was in the last year or so, but they changed the civil code in Japan. So this is like a very small law, so bear with me. You have the border of your plot right here, with your neighbor right next to it. They have a tree which is encroaching, basically growing onto your property, right? The base of the tree is on their property, but the leaves or the branches or something are coming over to your side of the property. So it used to be that you had to get your neighbor to cut the tree at the border. In other words, you couldn't cut the tree because it was their tree.
Interesting. Right? Even though it's kind of encroaching on your property.
Exactly. Even though it's completely encroaching on your property, you couldn't do anything about it. But they changed the law, so now you can just cut it right at your border.
That will make for funny shaped trees.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Why is Tokyo still such an attractive and booming real estate market? Why are the prices soaring and so many people still moving to Tokyo, despite the discussion now having been from the government that they want to move people back to the countryside, move people back to secondary or second tier or third tier cities across Japan?
So, for one thing, the Japanese government can't force people to do things. That's one issue. Not an issue, but that's one reason, I would say. But there is a natural outward kind of expansion into the suburbs and places where most people wouldn't necessarily want to live before in Tokyo. And that is actually due to the increasing of property values in the expensive areas, right? So if you're talking specifically about, let's say, the Azabus, like where my office is, or, like Aoyama or something like that, the price around there has just been insane, right? So I have a client who recently signed on a sale of his condo. He bought it in 2019, right? So what was that, 6 years ago, let's say? Was it? Yeah, 6 years ago. 6 years ago, he paid 300 million yen, right? For a penthouse, 130 square meter, give or take, and 2-bedroom. And he ended up selling it maybe a month ago or so for 740 million yen in the span of 5 years.
More than double.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years. It's more than doubled, right? So when stuff like that starts happening, right, he's not going to be able to buy in that area the same kind of place that he had before, even though he'd sold it for so much money. But yeah, so he's going to have to move further west where it's a bit cheaper, but it's still nice, right? And now, because of the people that are coming from the Azabus moving further west to Meguro, Ebisu, those kind of places, the people who used to live over there are being priced out. And then it's
So
just like
everyone's
this cascading effect.
being kicked out of the center, basically.
Exactly. So because of this, urban sprawl will continue in Tokyo, further and further out. But when we're talking about you were mentioning just having people like actually pick up and move into the more rural parts of Japan or the
even
smaller
other bigger
cities.
cities, yeah.
Exactly, the smaller cities and all that. I mean, there's only so much that the government can do about that, right? And they're trying. It's not so much a central government doing this; it's more the local governments. But they do things like offer you like one-time payments if you move out to whatever place that they represent, right? And in the case of, I mean, you've heard of the Akia, whole problem that they have over here, the abandoned home problem. A lot of the cases, these towns will actually give you money to the renovations on your own property out there. So yeah, it's there's a limit to what they can do on their end to get people out there. It's similar to what they're trying to do with the declining population, right? They offer a lot of stuff, right? Just like subsidies and literal cash payouts and free child health care and all these kind of things. I mean, you have a kid, I'm guessing, right now?
I do, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
But you're going to see just the extent to how their welfare system works. I mean, you come from a European country, so it's a bit...
So it's interesting because coming from a European country, the welfare system here is great.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily better. I would say it's a great system.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess coming from the United States,
I mean, anything's better than the U.S. healthcare system.
Yeah.
You kidding me? I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that, But especially when we're talking about child healthcare, I mean, you still have to pay to give birth in America. It's expensive too, While over here, it's a lot cheaper, right? But it's the same kind of thing in that the Japanese government is trying to do all of these things to get people to have more kids, and in the case of the local governments outside of Tokyo and the big cities, they are giving you literal cash incentives and all that. But at the end of the day, it's just how people decide to do things. Do they want to move out there? Do they want to have kids? Do they have the time to do either of these? What are they going to do for work? It's all of these problems, unfortunately.
So the people keep flocking to Tokyo, keep staying in Tokyo. Foreigners invest in Tokyo. Mm-hmm. Is it in a bubble? Is it a real estate bubble? Or do you feel like if you actually do the whole math behind property valuation, things add up?
It's hard to say if it is a bubble or not, of course. What I will say is that Tokyo is getting harder and harder to develop in. I was mentioning these big redevelopments, and as I was saying before, it takes decades in most cases for these to actually go through. And one of the biggest reasons is that after the war, they started, building more and more housing. And in like the 1950s and 60s, and really started ramping up in the 70s and 80s, they started doing condos. In other words, apartments where you actually own your unit and don't just rent it from somebody else. And what happens with these condos is that the law says that 80% of the owners of that condo building have to agree to a teardown in order for it to happen. So when you go to these parts, like especially Aoyama, like the Omotesando area, that has always been a really high-end neighborhood. So those kind of areas are where they started doing the original condo building. So one of the most famous condos in Japan is the Co-op Olympia, which was built in, I want to say 1963 or 1964 during the Tokyo Olympics, hence the name, right? And that place they've been talking about tearing down for decades at this point, and they can't get people on board with that, right? So because there is a lack of people allowing for their properties to be redeveloped, then you come down to the problem of, I can't build anything new, right? And when you can't build anything new, then you don't have more stock coming in, you don't have more units opening up, so you have scarcity, right? And when there's less things out there, it's supply and demand, right? When there's less properties out there that people can buy, they start doing things that they wouldn't have dreamed of before. For instance, renovating old properties, right? And then buying or flipping those or something like that, right? It used to be a complete moot project, but now there's a lot of developers who are buying up older units in sometimes even pre-earthquake code revision properties. And you want to talk about that soon, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I'll let you finish your thought, but I have a question about the condo renovation.
Yeah, we'll get that in a second. But then flipping those to people who don't care so much about the fact that it's not a brand new property, but oh, it looks cool inside, right? So also, Tokyo is one of two prefectures in Japan whose population is actually going up. The other one being Okinawa. Like that's it. So
Okay, now even
yeah,
Osaka is going down.
no, it's going down. Yeah, Osaka as a whole is going down, right? Osaka, the city, I'm sure is going up. But if you go out into, half hour, an hour outside of Osaka, the city proper, you're going to see population declines out there. So yeah, that's another reason with the supply and demand thing. And then also, finally, Tokyo has become an international buyer destination, which it wasn't. So I mean, the Chinese buyers were buying for a very, very long time at this point. But for non-Chinese buyers, that's only really become a thing maybe post-COVID even.
And it kind of is trendy, I feel like, that conversation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like, oh yeah, I bought a little pied-à-terre in Tokyo. Like that's what people want to say because it sounds dope. You know? It's like, oh yeah, he's got an apartment in Tokyo. You should go crash there,
Talking about those condos that people renovate, I'm very curious because you gave this example of this Olympia building that is from 1963 4. It's dated. And there are many properties that were built during that Showa period, during the big bubble 80s, 90s. Those buildings now are approaching 30, 40 years, and they just get older. So you can buy a property inside and you can renovate it, and it's going to look shining and new and great. But what is going on behind the walls? All the pipes, all the electric systems, you brought up the earthquake codes. How is the maintenance going for those buildings? And what's going to happen with all those buildings, let's say in another 20 years? Probably we'll have to have this conversation again then. But
I hope you're around. Dude. Yeah.
Like what is going to happen with all those buildings when the inside is falling apart and you can't, how do you find a problem in a pipe in a building that's like 15 stories high and you have to renovate something and you've got tenants everywhere? And
Of course. So the older the building, rule of thumb, the older the building, the more you're going to have to put into it over time, right? So in your monthly fees for a condo, just FYI, you bought a condo, so
yes.
You know how it is. So you have the monthly building fees.
Correct.
You're going to have two different ones at least.
I do, yeah.
Right? You have the building management fee,
Correct.
And then you have what's called the repair fund fee.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So the building management fee is just for the management company to staff their people there and to do cleaning of the building and make sure that everything is working correctly in the common areas, not so much in the exclusively owned areas, so the part that you own, but the common areas. And then there's the other charge that I was mentioning, which is the repair fund fee, which is exactly as it sounds, a big bank account they have that just like stocks a ton of money so that in the future, when the building needs renovations, even something as small as like, oh, the light bulb went out, they take it out from that, right? And so it depends on how big of a building. It could be somewhere in like the tens of millions of yen, like a couple $100,000 or something, into the millions of dollars if it's sometimes even tens of millions if it's a big enough building. Right. So what they'll do is they will draw out from that to do periodic renovations every 20 something years or so. And with that, it depends on the building. It depends on who is running it and all that. Sometimes they will be able to do things like changing out pipes, right? And dealing with electrical kind of things, but not always. And this is why it's really important if you're talking about an older building, thinking of buying an older building, to make sure that their management company is a good one, right? Who actually knows what they're doing. If they're one of the major ones and, they haven't had any scandals lately, they're probably pretty good, right? But if it's just a local one that has a ton of scandals, you probably want to avoid that.
If you're a foreign buyer, let's say you live in Japan, you buy a property, but you're a foreigner and you are looking into this, how do you evaluate the management company? How do you find information about whether or not they're good? Do they reach out to you and you kind of give them a background check?
That's definitely something that we do on our side. We will not recommend certain buildings to people if we know that that building has had problems or if we know that their property management company is not adequate, let's say. And in the case of a lot of smaller buildings, you'll notice that their management style is not actually to go through a management company, but to do it all themselves, right? So that is, I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah.
I think this is kind of what my management company is doing. So we have a monthly meeting,
Mm-hmm.
which is on a Saturday morning, which is 2 hours long, where we get like a 5 to 10 page long document with like points to discuss, a financial status of the management company, where the money is being spent, what has been renovated, what are the upcoming projects. And as participants, we can kind of like vote and decide what should be repaired and where we should put the money. But
So, I mean, that sounds just like a very proactive management board, if anything. That's just a different management style. What I'm talking about is sometimes there is no management company.
Oh.
Yeah. And when there's no management company, that means you're doing all the cleaning yourself.
no, okay. So
You know?
I don't know, but I know someone who has a
Oh, you
situation
do?
like this. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, like, that's it. And I'm not talking about the inside of your unit. I'm talking about the hallways,
Common areas.
all the common areas, the exterior. You guys want to get it pressure washed? Okay. Go hire the pressure washer dude. You know, like that's the kind of thing that we're talking about when I say no management company. But in the majority of places, they will have like a big company like Mitsui, Tokyo, something like that, that actually deals with it. And when they will go over to the management board and propose to them, hey, why don't we do an inspection and see what's going on with the building? But there's always, there's going to be a problem in every building at some points, right? It's just inevitable. But one that is pretty common in older buildings that haven't had a major renovation yet would be leaks from the roof, right? So every 5 or 10 years, depends on what they use and depends on the building, of course, you need to basically re-roof the roof, right? And what they do is they have this kind of like rubberized thing that it's this gray material.
They just did it on ours.
So you know about it.
Before we purchased it, actually, 2 years.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Yeah. So you see, you got in at a good time because it's still fresh, right? But like that's where most of the leaks will happen if they do happen, is if that starts to deteriorate. The other one could be, and I've seen this before. It's pretty rare for this kind of stuff to happen because generally speaking, Japanese, construction companies tend to do a good job with their builds, right? Knock on wood. Is leaks from other units. Right. So like, for instance, somebody, I don't know, their water main burst or something like that within the condo. And then it just starts leaking on the guy below. Right. It's pretty rare, but it does happen.
Occasionally, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. But in that case, this is why most people have insurance over here. It is not a legally required thing in Japan, but it's cheap enough where people just get it. I mean, you've got insurance on your place, right? And I'm sure you didn't pay more than a few €100 a year or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
It's not that expensive.
It's
I was
so
surprised
cheap.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, because like I'm from LA. In LA, we have massive wildfires, and up until recently, you still could get insured for fire insurance, but it was going to be, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars a year. I have a family friend. His place was quoted for, I want to say, $150,000 or $200,000 a year.
Wow.
For just fire insurance.
Nobody can pay for that.
Nobody can pay for that. So he ended up just insuring individual items in his house so that if it happened, then it would still be fine. It ended up being like a quarter of the price because it was still expensive though. But now they don't even allow you to get fire insurance in most parts of
Too risky.
LA.
They know there's too high of a chance for it to burn
Which
out.
I think it's a highway robbery. I think it should be a legal mandate for them to have to insure you, even if they do lose money, But in Japan, they don't have nearly as many wildfires or,
Although this year,
yes.
there were quite a few. That was surprising as well.
Because like I knew the word for wildfire only because I have to explain to Japanese friends and, coworkers and all that about what happens back home with me a lot. But I'd never heard it used in Japan before up until this year. So I think it was in
March.
Yeah, it was like February,
March.
March-ish in two different places, right?
Well, the big one was in the north.
Okayama. Oh, no, wasn't it? Yeah, there was one up north. There was one in Okayama.
And
I
then
think, too,
Okayama,
right? Yeah, and I'm thinking, wow, it was Ibaraki, was it, or further north?
Further north, I think north of Sendai.
Yeah, around there, something like that. And I'm thinking, wow, but even still, I mean, fire and flood insurance, which also covers robbery in most cases, by the way, is still ridiculously cheap over here. And this is why, like when people, especially from California, come to me and say, hey, what are like the annual costs to own a place over here? They hear the cost breakdown and they're like, where's the rest of it? Like they hear, oh, it's a few $100s to do the insurance. Okay, the property taxes will be, I don't know, maybe a couple grand or something like that. And we're talking about a place for, sometimes like 5-10 million US. And yeah, it'll be like, okay, maybe $8,000 a year for you, versus in America, or at least in California, if you buy a place for $1 million, it's going to be $12,000 a year in taxes. Over here, it could be $1,000 a year, maybe.
You mentioned the funds that you pay, so the management fee and the building repair fund.
Yes.
What happens in a situation where there are leaks, there are damages to the buildings, something needs to be done, but the funds that the company actually have is not sufficient to cover the repair? Who's liable?
All the people living there. They have to pay into it. They will have an emergency meeting and they'll have to pay into it. But in a lot of cases, the insurance that they have on either the building or in the individual units will cover that.
Interesting. So the
if we're talking specifically about leaks, then that will be covered.
What if it's just a repair that needs to be done? Let's say there's an earthquake somewhere and somehow the infrastructure gets a little bit damaged, but the funds to repair this are not sufficient. Is this the collective insurances of all the people living there? Is it the building management's insurance that will cover this? Or
a lot of the times it'll be the building itself having its own insurance that will pay out to that. And if for some reason they don't have insurance on that, which I can't think of many that don't, they will just have to reach out to all of the people living in it and then have them all pitch in, basically.
Last year, I believe, one TV show made the hit on Netflix, Tokyo Jimenshi. We briefly talked about it before starting. So Tokyo Swindlers in English, it's called, I believe, about one of the biggest real estate scams that happened here in Japan, and a scam format that is still happening. Is this something that buyers, especially individual buyers, are to be wary about? There was a news that someone in Osaka, a foreigner, apparently has been scammed for 10 million yen. Recently, or is this more like corporate scams?
I mean, it's a lot of work to do these kind of scams. So the people doing them tend to want to go after the bigger fish.
So just to summarize, a scam is basically someone pretending to be the owner of a certain piece of land or property, wanting to sell it to you, making it look like they have all the papers. You sign the papers, you transfer the money, and then you actually go there and someone else is living there telling you, no, I own this land. That's
correct. So this is why we have to double check things on our end. So one thing that they had in the show, you've seen the show?
Yeah.
Okay. So what they do is, as you were saying, they forge certain documents to make it look like the owner is the owner, right? Which most cases, it's just going to be some dude, right? Who is definitely not the owner. And the owner doesn't even know that the place is being sold to the buyer, right? Sold, air quotes, right? And so what they'll do is in order to sell a property in Japan, you need to provide a couple of documents, right? You have to provide the original deed, the original title, right, to the property. And if you don't have that, you have to go in with some supplementary documents. And then you also have to have a proof of stamp.
Oh yeah, the Hanko.
Yeah, so the Inkan Shomei is what they call it. So they make fake versions of that Inkan Shomei, as they call it, and then they'll submit it with either a fake version of the deed or no deed at all, and just like the supplementary documents that they need to get around that. And then they send that over to the Department of Legal Affairs, right, who will look through all the documents provided and make sure, literally they do this, by the way, where they stamp, right, on some other documents that the purported seller had stamped in the past, and they will actually check like this, like one of those little flip books that you may have played with as a kid, and they just check to see, is this the same stamp or not?
If there's any difference in the lines or thickness or...
Exactly, or design, right? So in most cases, the people doing these scams have no idea what the original stamp looks like.
Okay.
Right. So what we make sure that we do is we work with the person who will actually do the title transfer. It's called a judicial scrivener, to make sure that the documents are in fact real, right? And also in some cases you can have that checked, you can have that run by the department, like the legal affairs department, right, to make sure that that's all kosher, right? But yeah, I mean, that's not to say that everybody goes to that extent. And then also things have become a bit more stringent, especially since the TV show has come out. The sellers agencies especially are a lot more diligent in
Yeah, they
figuring
worried
out.
that it happens to them and their reputation is tarnished.
Right, but the thing is with these, the jimenshi, like I don't even know what you call it in English.
Swindlers.
Yeah, it's not quite the same, but like jimenshi is specifically a con artist that does these kind of cons.
Or for land, like
Specifically for land or for property and all that kind of thing, right? But what they're doing is they're using like kind of, let's say, like again, I was talking about the judicial scrivener, which is basically like a paralegal kind of person, the person who does the title transfer. They will have one in their pocket. They'll also have a real estate agency on their end in their pocket, right? So the seller's agency, again, all air quotes, will be in their pocket along with the other dude who will do the actual, title transfer. And then, on the buyer's end, there will be somebody else who has a more legitimate company, right? But here's the problem is that most properties are being transferred to people through this system that they have. It's like a database, right? Most properties that are being sold in Japan are put on this database so that other agencies can see it. They contact them, and then that's it. So it's like open, right? But with these kind of properties, they tend to be more special ones, right? So like the one that was featured in that TV show, and it's actually based on a real property, was somewhere between 8 to 10 billion yen, right? So what would that be? At the time, it was like 80 to 100 million dollars, right? And those kind of things never make it to the open market, right?
It's all like you have to know the person. It's like,
you have to know the guy who knows the guy who knows the guy, right? And so those kind of things, it's a lot easier to falsify, right? Because people are, in some cases, less wary about that, or at least they were before that TV show came out. Honestly, that TV show's made people a bit more wary about this kind of thing.
And more aware of that potential scam too.
Exactly, yeah. So, right, but when we're talking about especially the lower price properties and the more open properties, those things tend to never really, or not to the extent of the more expensive properties, have that problem, right? So in the case of the 10 million yen property that you're talking about, which is like, what, $75,000 or something like that, it could be stated that that property in particular, because it was so cheap, right, was not on the open market. Because when we're talking about properties that are on the open market versus off of the open market, the ones that are on the open market are the more reasonably priced ones, let's say, but not super cheap either, right? So the really expensive ones tend to be off market, and also the really cheap ones tend to be off market as well. So like all of the Akiya properties, as they called, right? But even 10 million yen these days, it's pretty hard to find something.
The property below 10 million, I think you'd have to be in a very rural area.
Yeah, and you said it was in Osaka.
Well, that's what I saw online. He's been scammed for that amount. I don't know if the property value was that amount.
Interesting. Okay.
It might have been a down payment or something like that. I would not.
Yeah, if it was just a down payment, I mean that could very well make sense. Because down payments tend to be about 5 to 10%. So yeah, that would totally make sense for something around 100 million yen, give or take.
The property market is changing, evolving, very competitive. Prices are doubling within a span of 5 years. How do you, with Tokyo Portfolio, kind of navigate those changes, stay competitive? What are your kind of key points of focus?
Our key points of focus are, these days, to be honest, we're just getting too many people coming in, right? So we are expanding our team. We want it to be like a not too crazy of an expansion at once. We need to be a bit more gradual so that we have a good quality team, right? Versus just a big team with incompetent people, right? And as we were talking about before, like the market is just becoming more and more popular amongst people who don't live in Japan. And since we cater to those kind of people, we're getting more and more attention because of that, right? So right now, that is basically the biggest change that we were having to do. Otherwise, it's more or less business as usual. That's pretty much it.
Are you looking also a little bit more now beyond Tokyo, Osaka perhaps, or Kyoto? What are the other hot property markets in Japan?
Yeah, so as you were saying, Kyoto and Osaka definitely are very popular places in Japan to buy right now. But we also see people asking for properties over in Okinawa. That's a big one. Fukuoka, we get a lot as well. Up in Hokkaido, that's always been a popular place, like up near Niseko, the big ski resort area. And even in Sapporo proper, we've been seeing more people asking about it. But that's pretty much the majority of places. Nagoya is definitely not on there for some reason. I don't have anything against Nagoya, except, there's nothing there.
Kind of in between and maybe less interesting to some.
I'm not going to say that.
The locals will probably give us a long list of things that are super exciting about Nagoya and why it's a great place to live.
Yeah, you say that, but I've yet to meet somebody from Nagoya that says, yo, Nagoya is amazing. But hey, if there's anybody from Nagoya out there, please tell me what's nice about Nagoya. I want to learn, honestly. I've been there a couple of times and
maybe
I want to see
we can invite them on the podcast and talk about life in Nagoya.
Please, Mayor of Nagoya, come on his podcast and talk all about it. But yeah, it's definitely from the north to the south. We're talking Sapporo, Tokyo, of course, even Yokohama. That's a big one for us. Kyoto, Osaka, sometimes even Nara. We've had some people asking around there. Yep, and Fukuoka, Okinawa.
Are you able to cover all these areas, or do you still want to focus more on Tokyo because this is kind of your expertise and because it's all within easy reach?
Well, legally speaking, unlike a lot of other countries, we can actually show properties down there. In the U.S., for instance, if I had a California brokerage license, I wouldn't necessarily be able to sell in New York, But over here, it's the same license, for the entire country. It's just a matter of, can we go all the way down to wherever it is and actually show? It's a time thing, exactly. I show properties in Okinawa. We're in Osaka, not Okinawa. I show properties in Osaka every once in a while, But even still, it's just I can do it in a day. I can leave in the morning, come back in the evening, kind of deal. But yeah, when you get anything further than that, it's kind of a whole thing. Like I have to be really sure that person is interested in buying down there before I decide to make the jump and go there.
A lot of these properties, not a lot, some of these properties you showcase on your channel as well, Tokyo Portfolio. Some very interesting places, houses, condos. What are people most interested in?
In general, it seems like people are really interested in the ultra luxury properties. That is one thing. And also, when it comes to houses, it's a bit difficult because Japanese people build houses in a different way than people from outside.
The layout
Japan.
and
Exactly. Yeah, the layout, the materials that they would use. In most cases, they're going to cheap out in places that people outside of Japan would want to put as much money in as possible. For instance, the kitchen, right? So kitchens in Japan tend to be prefabbed, right?
We often talk about the galley.
Yeah, the galley kitchen. Yeah, that's its own thing. I'm not a fan of the galley. I'm more of an open kitchen kind of boy. But especially older Japanese houses, and not older necessarily like 100 years ago old, but even 10 years old kind of things. You'll see, they tend to kind of be in their own little pocket in the side. So forget about an open kitchen. Sometimes they even have doors closing them off from the living and dining room. But yeah, because I just put up a video, I don't know when you're going to be airing this, but in May or June of 2025, I put up a video of a house over in Yoyogi Uehara.
Oh, I watched it this morning before you came. Is it the one where the guy had the train area in between?
The guy had the train area in between the two floors. Yep, that's.
I feel like those houses, when I look at those, they are an extravagant fantasy of a wealthy person at that time who wants some kind of a European-inspired, Japanese functionality included kind of house with heavy wood and like very strange, and like a little castle. For kids, it's awesome, but as a livable space, why is this room like this? Why is that room? It's kind of a mystery.
That whole house, by the way, is 700 square meters. 700 square meters. That's like the size of maybe 2 or 3 of the floors in this building, right? This is a pretty big building. And so when you think of it that way, you'd think, oh, it must be a huge interior. If you guys haven't watched the video, go watch it. It doesn't feel that big inside, unfortunately. And it's because they over compartmentalize things, right?
Too many rooms.
Exactly. It's a 700 square meter. That's like 7,500 square feet. That's gigantic. But it's, I think, a 5 or 6 bedroom or something like that, maybe more. No, sorry, I think it came out to 8 bedrooms in total. Plus, it has a basement. The basement's pretty cool, actually. That has like the screening room and all that. But it has all of the elements that should be there. Oh, it has a fireplace in the living room. That's really cool. I don't know. It has an elevator that could be cool, right? The gym area. It has a pool table in it. It has all these things that if they were to take the time and actually make it a better layout, it would be an amazing house. And then also, if they didn't make it like, dark cherry wood everywhere. But yeah, you know what? I mean, money does not buy you taste, unfortunately. That's all I can say. But what I've seen is that, compared to that one, I did another house tour about one in Yokohama.
I've watched that one as well. This
You
one
saw
is
that
like
one.
very different style.
Very different style. Half the size, by the way. It's like 300, so less than half the size. It's 300 square meters, about 200 square feet, let's call it. And that one in Yokohama is on top of a hill. It's only 2 stories versus the 3 above. So let's call it 4 stories for the one in Yoyogi, right? Yet it feels so much bigger. It just does. The living room, dining room, kitchen is almost the same size.
Large open space.
Large open space, huge windows, right? All of these things they could have done. They could have had a courtyard inside of it, make it really feel nice and light and all that. But no, they didn't. And, I don't want to say this, but it's a difference in Japanese aesthetic, right? Versus the Western aesthetic. And with the one in Yokohama, one of the spouses is an Australian, actually. Right?
Oh, is she I don't know if I can say this on camera. You mentioned the artist that made the wall paintings and the carpets.
No, she's not the artist.
She's not
the sister
the
of the artist. Funny you bring that up.
Right,
Yeah, exactly. So the sister of the artist is the owner, and then her husband is Japanese, right? And they put so much effort into the design of that house, right? I mean,
it's very thoughtful.
Very, very thoughtful. Yeah. And it's not overdone. It's only 3 bedrooms, and then they have the screening room as well. But it's so well done. Everything is so well thought out. I mean, you saw the little doggy door that they have there, like the doggy gate thing. It's like every little detail.
The little rest area to watch Mount Fuji and
yes, exactly. I mean, that balcony, for instance. So it just goes to show that it's not that Japanese contractors or Japanese architects can't do nice houses. It's that, generally speaking, the people who are deciding on, who actually are building the place for themselves, don't know what they're doing, right? And also, it's a difference between, with that place, it's a 3-bedroom. How many baths are there? 2. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, right? That place that you saw over in Yogi Uehara is a 7 or 8-bedroom, I want to say 2-bath. For people who are listening to this, my mind is exploding. I'm doing the mind exploding thing right now, because it's unbelievable to me that, by the way, that place was fully occupied, right? The whole family, it was like 3 generations living in that house. The grandmother, the parents, and the kids were all living in that house.
And queuing up to go to the bathroom. I'm like, dude, come on. You had space to put a train room. You could have done anything there, But they decided to... So do these properties sell?
As of recording this, that property has not sold. I want to just go out on a limb and say that it is completely overpriced as well, but
interesting.
You didn't hear that from me. But yeah, what I will say is that there's a good chance that somebody will buy that and tear it down because it is a very nice property, and then build something actually nice.
So the location again holds a value, but the house is.
Oh yeah, because believe it or not, I don't know if I mentioned that in the video, but that house is from 2009.
That's super recent.
Can't you? You can't believe that, right? It's. I couldn't believe it either when I went in there. I'm like, oh, this must be
80s.
Late 80s, exactly. Yeah. And people in the comments were saying the same thing. I have to respond to them, say, nope, 2009. Sorry, dude. And I've seen other properties from the 80s, by the way, that look way more modern than that house.
We're talking about properties for sale. You also made a recent video where you showcased things that people can rent. You mentioned the average rental price people or your clients are paying is around 500,000 yen.
Yes.
Which is a pretty big and large amount. I think if you pay 500,000 yen rent in Osaka, you can probably live in a very, very nice place. I don't know about Tokyo, but what should people look out for when they're looking for a property through you in terms of like rental spaces, areas, any things to know?
Just about renting in general in Tokyo, what they should look out for. I would say, look, you have to come into it thinking price-wise, it's not going to be Singapore on the low end. It's not going to be Los Angeles and New York on the high end. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. If you are willing to...
Is Singapore cheaper than Tokyo?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
In general, yeah. Hong Kong is more, by the way. Like
Hong Kong
way
is
more.
crazy.
Yeah,
Hong
yeah.
Kong
So
is,
like this is why I love my clients who had just lived in Hong Kong. They come to Tokyo and they're like, "Oh, it's so cheap here. Oh, and they're so big
makes it
too."
easier for you to kind of get them on board with.
Yeah. Or people from San Francisco or LA or whatever, they come over here and they're like, "Whoa, that's amazing. I can get a nice place for like 2,000 US a month." You know. Yeah, yeah. So like over here though, or not here in Osaka, but up in Tokyo, I would say, yeah, just come in remembering how much you're going to have to pay, right? And then also go in there realizing you're probably not going to get what you had back home unless you fork out a lot of money to go for a, foreigner specific place, right?
Last time you came, you talked a lot about the bathrooms, that the American customers are often surprised by the bathrooms. And we just talked about it again in that house.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm still surprised. I mean, Japan, they have a really, really like great bathing culture. You go to the sento, you go to the public baths, you go to the hot springs and all that. They put so much money into these bathrooms, right? And I guess the thinking is, all right, you could just go down the street and take a really nice bath in some public bath. Why would you put money into your own little bath? I guess. I don't know. I mean, a lot of it does come down to the culture thing. I think we discussed this last time, and that somebody will, if they're at home and there's a family, right? A family of 4 or something, the traditional way of doing it is father goes in first, then eldest, then second eldest child, right? And then the mother, right? They all use the same bath water. They shower off first, they wash off first, then they go into the bath. That's a traditional way of doing it. And, even to this day, it's still done one after another, and the bath water is shared. It's just not the same order anymore necessarily. But it's the same, concept. Everybody's still sharing the bathwater. And that's unlike most countries that I know of. How is it in Germany? Do you know?
Most people shower now.
Well, yeah, they shower, but like in terms of amounts of bathrooms, let's say you had a 3-bedroom house. Would you have
Let's
one
say
bath? Or would you have
maybe.
2? Exactly. You would have 2, right? You would have like an ensuite, maybe, right? Where it's connected to one of the bedrooms. Or if not, maybe it's like right
Or
next
one
to
per
it.
floor,
Or one,
depending if you have a 2-story house.
if it's a house, exactly. But even in houses, like again, even that house in Yoyogi Uehara, that thing is 3 stories above ground and it has a basement. And I think it has 2 bathrooms, like, or just showers, right? You have the bathroom in the basement, you have the master bathroom as well. But it's just that Japanese people don't see the need for it. And in fact, I know a lot of Japanese people who used to live abroad in places like Hong Kong. Maybe their company sent them out there or something. They lived in Hong Kong. They lived in the US, the UK. And, they would be put into these really nice apartments or houses that have, let's say, 4 bedrooms and 3 baths or 4 baths or something like that. And they ended up not using the other baths,
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling to me, but this is just how the culture is over here.
So be ready for something different, but competitive prices depending on where you come from.
Yeah,
in
absolutely. And when we're talking about condos, in a lot of cases, you can't actually build a second bath in the condo because the building laws don't allow you to do it. It's just so foreign to me. That's like the one thing I still can't get my head around for Japan, is why can't there be more than one bath, guys? Come on.
Well, I'm happy I have 2. It's very convenient.
You have 2 baths?
Yeah.
How'd you get
Not
2
baths, 2 toilets.
Oh, 2 toilets.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah. 2 toilets even. That in a condo?
Yes.
Wow. How many bedrooms do you have? Sorry. Private information, maybe.
I think it's 3.
Okay, that's good though. That's really rare because
we changed the layout a little bit.
Did you add a toilet?
No, just we broke down some walls to make more open space. So I think there used to be more rooms. So now
Like a 4-bed or something
Yeah.
like that. Oh, you have a big condo, man.
Pretty spacious outside
Nice.
of the city. So
Still, I mean, look, it's pretty common to have a 3-story house that has maybe 2 toilets.
yeah, or sometimes 1.
But sometimes 1. Yeah, no, I've seen that many times. But like the most you'll see is 3 toilets, right? Unless it was specifically built by somebody who is either not from Japan or somebody who's Japanese who is very internationally inclined, right? And this is a big reason that a lot of people in the past had been kind of against buying in Japan for their own reasons, because they're like, okay, I'm buying a 3-bedroom condo and there's literally 1 bathroom. Okay, like I'm going to be staying here with my family. They're going to be fighting over the toilet. They're going to be fighting over the sink. Oh yeah, and by the way, it's not a dual vanity. It's a single vanity, like 1 sink instead of 2 right next to each other. And like over here, they think of that as a luxury. I'm like, no, that's just normal. You go to any house in rural Alabama, you're going to be able to get, 2 sinks next to each other in every bedroom, like an ensuite in every bedroom.
So the bathroom still the key topic for people to be aware of.
Dude, it's the key topic for me. It's like, I love bathrooms. I'm sorry. I mean, if you watch my channel, I climb into every tub I have a chance to climb into, I love the bath. And like, I chose my apartment. I lived in the same apartment for 10 years. I chose that apartment because of the bath. Literally, I chose it. It has a glass bathtub.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's not an expensive apartment. It's tiny too. I've been living in the same apartment for 10 years. It's 33 square meters. Yet it has a glass bathtub, and I love it. Yeah. That's my 2 cents about baths though.
What's next for Tokyo Portfolio and Blackship Realty? You mentioned growing the team and navigating those challenges. We met 1 year ago. If we were to meet in a year from now, what are the projects that you're going to be working on, or the things you'd like to achieve?
So we are expanding into other things as well. We have opened up our first hotel. I'm not sure if you heard about this one. I mean, it seems more like an Airbnb, but license-wise, it is actually a hotel.
Property purchased by your company,
yes,
turned into a hotel.
Yes. So as a company, we've actually bought a few properties up until now. So we have an entire apartment building as well, and we have the this house that we converted into a hotel, like a fully licensed hotel in Ebisu, or like between Ebisu and Hiro, closer to Hiro. And we're looking to expand into that business a bit more. Ooh. So we've just bought a second one that we're going to do that too as well, closer to Ebisu Station. So that's a station next to Hiro. And also, as I was saying before, we're expanding. So we are actively looking for competent people who want to be in real estate that speak both English and Japanese. So if you guys know anybody, or if you yourself are one of them, please contact me in the link in the description below.
Yeah. We will add the link so people can reach out if they're interested in the real estate market in Japan and want to work with you.
Yeah, but also, I mean, look, we want to, we're trying to revamp the YouTube channel, putting out more content, and we've been pretty good about doing it once a month these days. In fact, that's one of the things that I was doing down here in Osaka these last 2 days. I was in Hiroshima the other day to do a property. To do a video on a property in Miyajima, you know what that is?
Yeah, the little island where the shrine is, that is standing in the water with the tide going in.
That's the one. So that one will probably be out by the time this video comes out, as Very well cool. as probably the most expensive condo in Osaka.
I wanted to see that one. I should have tagged along today.
Yeah, that one.
Where is it?
I'll put it this way, close to this office.
Interesting.
In fact, I just walked here from there.
Interesting. Yeah, so I'll have to look out and think which of those buildings might host that expensive.
You'll probably figure it out pretty.
Well, once I see the video, I guess.
It's very sparkly. Yeah.
So more YouTube, growing the company, growing your side business around, a lot of exciting projects.
Yeah. And then also, again, expanding the team. I mean, we're getting more and more people trying to buy in Japan, so we're looking to serve them.
Those videos, you do a lot of research for them, because every time I watch one, you are explaining how they made the wall, how the flooring is made, and so on. How much work goes into this?
So in the case of some of the buildings and properties, I am lucky enough to be able to talk to the owner of the property and vet things with them first. So for instance, the Yokohama property, the owner was kind enough to walk me through the entire thing bit by bit. Wow. In fact, there were parts that I didn't even share of that property, right? Just because I didn't really have time to talk about it all. But, I've been doing this for 6 years. I'm just kind of a nerd when it comes to materials. I'm a very tactile guy.
I see the passion,
yeah. Yeah, and like I like going into showrooms and all that and just kind of, futzing around, looking around, trying to figure out, oh, look at this new toilet that they just came out with. Oh, look at this new, wall material they came out with. This is kind of what I do on my free time. I should probably get a different hobby. But so it's a combination of that and just learning by mistake and learning by, just being on the job and thinking, oh, what is that material? Let me look it up,
So a lot of new exciting videos coming, lots of projects, lots of things. Alex, thank you so much for coming again. and talking to us and more insights into the Japanese real estate market. We talked mostly about Tokyo because that's where a lot of things are happening and where your expertise lies. And maybe by next time we'll also have more things to talk about in Osaka.
Yeah, I'd love to be on again,
For people who are looking for a job, we'll put the link in the description, or most importantly for people looking for real estate, they can reach out and kind of get in touch with you and your team. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll be back again next week. Bye.
Next week.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future conversations. And we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you enjoyed this episode, here are a couple more that we think you'll enjoy. Thanks again for your support, and we'll see you next time.